In the wake of the atrocities committed by Hamas terrorists against innocent civilians in southern Israel on October 7th, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu resolved to eliminate Hamas. And since that time, the IDF has conducted military operations against the Gaza Strip designed to carry out that end. Operation Swords of Iron is the name of the IDF's war on Hamas, and as Michael Eisenstadt at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy puts it, it is a sustained air, sea, and land campaign to destroy the group's military capacity, end its rule in Gaza, and obtain the safe return of several hundred Israeli and foreign hostages taken during the attack. The Air and Sea campaign has targeted Hamas's Gaza-based political leadership, its military commanders and fighters, along with command centers, training facilities, rocket launch sites, and the tunnel network under Gaza. After pummeling Hamas for several weeks from the air, the first phase of the ground campaign began, focused on trapping Hamas fighters by encircling Gaza City from 3 directions, while allowing civilians to flee down an established refugee corridor to the south end of the Strip. The simplicity and clarity of that plan shifted after a 7-day ceasefire that, according to Israelis, allowed Hamas fighters to flow out of harm's way into the southern region of Gaza around the city of Khan Yunis. The IDF has targeted claimed new Hamas facilities with the same ferocity as they've demonstrated to the north. Meanwhile, the civilians who were originally told to head south are now being told to move back north to the center of Gaza, where the Israelis say they have established another safe zone. But the level of devastation has made it impossible for refugees to move, and they're basically trapped wherever they are. In recent days, international relief agencies and doctors in the area have stated their concerns about how the humanitarian crisis is now out of control. Information around the Israel-Hamas war is being released faster than it can be verified, and the mainstream media has missed a lot of important details around this conflict, which is why ground news has become an integral tool in my research as I create current events episodes. This app and website combine articles from all around the world and show context the mainstream media doesn't. Here's a good example. On my last episode, I covered some of the high-level details about the temporary ceasefire and associated hostage and prisoner exchanges. This topic has been full of misinformation in recent days. Using ground news, you can see a box score of how many stories there are on the topic and what the bias distribution is. Then you can scroll through those stories and see the source, the factuality rating, and the bias for each one of them, and then compare 2 different headlines based on those variables. Seeing it broken down this way makes it really easy to understand how media outlets are coming at any given story, and that helps you get a more balanced view of current events. Go to ground.news/Ward Carroll. That's ground.news/Ward Carroll. You can subscribe for as little as $1 a month or get 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I have access to. I highly recommend you check it out. The link is in the episode description and also pinned to the top of the comments. From the outset, the Israeli government pronounced that while they intended to eradicate Hamas, they were going to do so while protecting civilians to the greatest degree possible. However, recently American intelligence sources revealed that 40 to 45% of the 29,000 pieces of ordnance dropped by the Israeli Air Force were dumb bombs rather than precision-guided ones. That stat is shocking at a glance. However, it's also misleading in the context of an air campaign. The differentiation of smart and dumb bombs in the context of Operation Swords of Iron is by itself relatively meaningless. Couple things to consider. The first is the Israeli Air Force flies F-16s and F-15s, both very accurate dumb bombers that use the constantly computed impact point CCIP symbology that allows pilots to hit what they aim at. In this picture, you see an Israeli Air Force F-15 loaded with both smart bombs, in this case GBU-31 JDAMs, and dumb bombs, Mark 82s. Second point is the Israelis are also using F-35s. In fact, the Pentagon rushed computer files to the Israelis to allow the Joint Strike Fighter to be more effective against Hamas. The F-35 is not a dumb bomber and has most likely been dropping JDAMs during Operation Swords of Iron. The third point is JDAMs, which are GPS-guided bombs, will hit the coordinates input to the weapon, but laser-guided smart bombs are only as smart as the aviators operating the laser spot are, meaning a smart bomb can hit the wrong target as well. The fourth point is that the Israeli Air Force is executing the air campaign against a prioritized target list with targets that are weaponeered for both smart and dumb bombs. And not all targets are appropriate for smart bombs. Using dumb bombs in warfare does not inherently qualify as quote-unquote indiscriminate bombing, as President Biden and some critics have claimed in the wake of the recent American intelligence report. And lastly, a better stat would be around the battle damage assessment, also known as BDA. What is the percentage of bombs dropped overall that have hit their intended targets? That would be a better indicator of threats against civilians rather than percentage of dumb bombs dropped. Meanwhile, a couple of things have come to light in recent weeks that challenge the Netanyahu government's claim to the high ground and their justification for their goal of eradicating Hamas. The first is something we mentioned in a previous episode, which is a New York Times report that the Israelis knew about a plan called Jericho Wall, which was the Hamas strategy to attack the kibbutzes of southern Israel a year before it actually happened, but they did nothing about it. According to the Times, the Jericho Wall document was circulated widely among the Israeli military and intelligence leader, but it's unclear whether Netanyahu or other top political leaders saw the document. At the time, Israeli military and intelligence officials dismissed the plan, assessing that it would be too difficult for Hamas to carry out. In addition to the New York Times report, CNN has just revealed that the U.S. intelligence community produced at least 2 assessments warning the Biden administration of an increased risk for Palestinian-Israeli conflict in the weeks ahead of October 7th. One update from September 28th warned that Hamas was poised to escalate rocket attacks across the border. That was followed by an October 5th wire from the CIA that warned generally of the possibility of violence by Hamas. Then on October 6th, the day before the attack, U.S. officials circulated reporting from Israel indicating unusual activity by Hamas, indications that are now clear. An attack was imminent. None of the American assessments offered any tactical details or indications of the overwhelming scope, scale, and sheer brutality of the operations that Hamas carried out on October 7th. And it's unclear if any of these U.S. assessments were shared with Israel. But in spite of all of this, a U.S. official told CNN that the U.S. government had no prior knowledge of the Jericho Wall document. According to the CNN report, the intelligence shared with U.S. officials by Israel reveals how Hamas hid the planning of the operation through old-fashioned counterintelligence measures, such as conducting planning meetings in person and staying off digital communications whose signals the Israelis can track, in favor of hardwired phones in the vast network of tunnels that the IDF is currently contending with as they fight to eradicate the military threat of Hamas. Then another revelation emerged that blurs the Netanyahu government's claim to absolute rightness, and even more than the alleged security failures in the face of the Jericho Wall report, this one suggests that to a significant degree, the Hamas problem is by and large of Israel's own making. And as we've discussed on the channel in the weeks since October 7th, the basic charge against Prime Minister Netanyahu is that because of the demands of the far right-wing settlers that form his political base, he was focused on the threat posed by the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank at the expense of the security of settlers in southern Israel. Now, a CNN report suggests that the situation is even worse in that under the auspices of weakening the Palestinian Authority, the Israeli government actually facilitated Qatari funding of Hamas that allowed the group to develop the military capabilities used to murder 1,200 Israeli civilians on October 7th. In 2018, Qatar began making monthly payments to the Gaza Strip. Some $15 million was sent to Gaza in cash-filled suitcases delivered by the Qataris through Israeli territory after months of negotiation with Israel. The money was supposed to pay for medical facilities and the salaries of government employees and overall stabilize the Gaza Strip, which the Israelis supported as it was a counterweight to the threat the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank posed to Israel. Critics of Netanyahu have also claimed that he supported the Qatari funding because having multiple power bases undermined any hope of a Palestinian state, which again was the proper strategy in the eyes of his ultra-conservative political base. However, on October 7th, it became tragically obvious the degree to which Hamas did not use the Qatari funding for its intended purpose. These revelations, along with the images of the suffering and devastation that Operation Swords of Iron is causing to innocent civilians, has threatened the support of Israel by allies, most importantly, the support of the United States. Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Biden already have a history from when Biden was the vice president, and Netanyahu went directly to the U.S. Congress in an attempt to torpedo the Iran nuclear deal. A couple of days ago, President Biden said that Israel's conduct of the war risked losing international support. He also said that the far-right government, quote, doesn't want anything remotely approaching a two-state solution with the Palestinians, end quote. The Biden administration has proposed that once hostilities cease, Gaza should be governed by the Palestinian Authority as the first step towards a Palestinian homeland. In response, Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that as long as he's prime minister, he won't allow Gaza to turn into Fatahstan, which is a reference to the Palestinian group Fatah that controls the Palestinian Authority. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is in Israel right now in an attempt to run some of the disagreements to ground, but it's doubtful any of the issues between the two countries will jeopardize America's support. In addition to the billions in military funding over the years, since October 7th, the U.S. has provided Israel 15,000 bombs and 57,000 artillery shells. And in spite of their current differences and growing international demands for an immediate ceasefire, President Biden has offered Prime Minister Netanyahu whatever he needs to, quote, finish the job, end quote, against Hamas. More on this volatile situation as the information becomes available. So if you're not already a subscriber, become one so you don't miss anything. And if you'd like to help support the channel, please consider using the super thanks, the heart icon below, or become a patron at patreon.com/WardCarroll. And in the meantime, I look forward to talking to you again very soon.